Okay, thank you, committee. It looks like we are back on live stream. So what I'm going to ask is for Director Donaldson just to start once again at the beginning so that we have this captured. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So just to, again, just to go back to the recap from the January 30th and February 1st meetings, committee endorsed a 10-year capital budget in principle of $11,346,800. The 10-year forecast for our capital budget was $99,546,900. And future staff action and reports requested by committee included an update to our reserve and reserve fund policy to come back later in the year, an expanded level of detail of reserve activity, which is included in your package today for 2023, a review of the long-term capital inflation assumptions with respect to fire, public works, and other areas, an inventory and location of fire equipment to ensure we understand what equipment we have and where it's positioned in the township, and a review of the vehicle replacement schedule and the impact it would have on various insurance implications and underwriters for the municipality. So at the previous meeting, Council approved a resolution to revise the budget guidelines approved by Council at its regular meeting in January. So the direction provided to staff was to not increase contributions to reserves and reserve funds in 2023 over the 2022 contributions from the tax levy, and to find an additional $300,000 in net savings, either through reduced expenditures or increased non-tax revenues. So I'm pleased to report the operating budget presented today is within these new committee guidelines with no impacts to service levels. So as seen in the table, noted as table 1 in the staff report, the total tax levy for 2023 in this draft budget is set at $13,404,100. That's a levy increase of $374,500 or 2.9% over 2022, including growth in assessment. If we exclude assessment growth, the rate increase for this budget is 1.6%, which is an increase of $2.02 to $127.30 per $100,000 of assessment. So it's a $2.02 increase over 2022 on the rate. On a consolidated basis, when we're including the proposed district tax supported increase that is currently tabled on the district's website, and with no increase in the education amount, the percentage increase in the total levy on a consolidated basis for all levels of government is 3.5%, and excluding growth, that's a 2.2% rate increase for all levels of government, which amounts to a $12.64 increase per $100,000 of assessment over 2022. Increases in operating costs have been reduced from 4.7% in the first draft to 3.5% in this draft, while non-tax revenue have been increased from 0.1% in the first draft to 3.6% in this draft, as noted in the table. So as mentioned, the savings requested have been able to be achieved with no impacts to service levels. That being said, committee will be asked to consider some service enhancements during these deliberations, which may impact what has been presented thus far. As directed by committee, contributions from the tax levy to reserve and reserve funds are unchanged from 2022 at $3,559,000. At this level of contribution, based on the 2023 capital budget, the total reserve and reserve fund balances are forecasted to fall below $20 million by the end of 2023. The remainder of the savings requested by committee have been achieved through a balanced approach by decreasing expenses by 60% of the target, or $180,900, and increasing non-tax revenues by 40% of the target, or $119,100. So the 10-year tax levy rate history chart that I presented on January the 30th has been updated to illustrate the impact of the changes in draft 2 by showing a nearly flat dashed line for the year-over-year rate change to the right of the chart, and a slight dip in the solid line, which is the year-over-year levy change before consideration of any of the service enhancements to be discussed. The very faint dotted line is what was presented in the first draft on January 30th. So just a few words on reserve and reserve fund balances. So this chart has been broken out in more detail with respect to reserve and reserve fund balances. It's shaded and color coded to illustrate the breakdown between obligatory reserves, council discretionary reserve funds, and discretionary reserves. So based on this draft budget at the end of 2023, the total for all reserve and reserve fund balances will fall to less than $20 million. What's important to note here is that 40% of this change that's in this chart is made up of obligatory reserve funds. So of that 40%, which is roughly about $8 million of the 20, $5 million of it belongs to the building reserve, which is for inspection services and is not available to the township for general use. And 1.2 million of it is accumulated development charges, which is restricted for capital investments, that is for growth only. And it's not for rehabilitation of existing assets. The Parkland Dedication Fund is received in lieu of land and can be used for some recreational facilities, but it's not available for core infrastructure where some of the township's most pressing needs are. So it's important just to understand restrictions around some of those funds, and that the 20 million or just under 20 million at the end of 2023, what's actually available at council's discretion is more in the neighborhood of 12 to 14 million, which is about 55 to 60% of that balance. So this chart's an overlap of the annual budgeted capital expenses noted by the solid line and the reserve and reserve fund balances, both historical and forecasted. So I've shown this chart from 2011 out to forecasted to 2032. The shaded, again, the bars are stacked and shaded to reflect the different types of reserves based on their type: obligatory, discretionary, and discretionary reserves. The township's made a concerted effort over the past number of years to increase reserve and reserve fund balances in anticipation of capital needs in the future. And what we're seeing in this solid line is that the annual average capital spend is approximately double what it has been historically. So you can see the line is hovering below $5 million between 2011 and 2019. Then it starts to increase, and from 2023 out, we're kind of vacillating over that $10 million line. So there's an average spend there that's quite significantly more than has been historically. The forecasted scenario, as you're seeing it here for illustrative purposes, is assuming that contributions to reserves from the levy will increase by 10% over that amount. So this year is $3,559,000. That would increase by 10%. It would be cumulative, and that would approximately be about a 3 to 5% impact on the tax levy, depending on what the tax levies are going forward, but that's a rough range. And at the end of 2032, you can see we're below $15 million. It starts to grow towards the end, but that's assuming that there's a continued growth on contributions to reserves in the future by a certain amount. I think it's important to note again that by 2032, roughly a third of that stacked bar is from obligatory reserve funds, as mentioned earlier. So just to talk about the reductions that were requested by committee. So we again had a $300,000 target that was provided to us, and it's noted that we've balanced that between lower expenditures and increased revenues. With respect to the lowered expenditures, most of the savings are generated in the area of public works under contract services. This was achieved by deferring a number of minor maintenance projects that were needed, but not urgent. And staff are looking at consulting fees. We also looked at that with respect to reductions, mostly in the area of planning. And there were some rationalization reduction of software license purchases also available. The original draft also looked at an application, an increase in the application based community grants It was historically higher pre-pandemic. It was lower during the pandemic. That has now been reduced back to what it was in 2022. So we had provided $20,000 a year in community grants. So this budget reflects the same number, $20,000 for that purpose. On the revenue side, the most significant increase would involve a change to the fees bylaw that currently does not charge residents for the first false alarm fire call. So this change would now impose the MTO rate as set by the province for a single apparatus for the first and second false alarm fire calls. As well, additional fee revenues have been proposed in Public Works for applying increases to recreational facility usage to close the gap between fees of our neighboring communities and ourselves, as well as amending past resolutions of council that discount fees included in the fee bylaw for user groups of community centers and park facilities. We also looked at dock fees at the township-owned wharves and wharves facilities, and interment fees at the cemeteries, which are being recommended to bring us more in line with our neighboring communities. The increases to the bylaw also have been implemented or introduced again to bring us in line with some parity with our neighboring communities as well. So just a quick word on some of the service enhancements. So we've got 6 operating proposals. They're unchanged from what was distributed in the January package that you received. The impact of approving all the proposals as they're currently presented would increase the tax levy to 5.4% from the 2.9% that was earlier in the deck. And that would be a rate increase of 4.1%, which is $5.14 per $100,000 of assessment. So that would make the new rate $130.42. For committee's consideration, a letter was also received from the Architectural Conservancy Ontario, ACO Muskoka, with respect to designated properties and the impacts of Bill 23. There's no business case attached to that, but it has been provided for information with respect to this item, and staff would be pleased to speak to it later in the meeting. So just in closing, the tentative meeting date, as noted by the chair, has been set for Tuesday evening for public input on the operating and capital budget. If it's the desire of committee, and approved in principle operating and capital budget as amended would be presented at that meeting for public comment, and then they would be summarized and then brought back to this committee for final deliberation before being forwarded to council in March for final adoption. So that's kind of our path forward from here. And that's my overview at this time. I'm trying to hand it back to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Donaldson. Committee, are there any questions for Director Donaldson at this point? Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you, I guess to you. Actually, wondering when it would be appropriate to, here we are wanting to look for questions. I have my thoughts on Mark's summary. Are we going to go through this piece by piece? How would you like we as councillors or committee members at least to opine on some of this much more reasonable starting point?
So as mentioned at the beginning, we're going to go through by each division, and I will ask questions first. So this is the point to ask questions of clarification. And then we will have a discussion. So following that formula on each section, if there are things that are, I would call it parking lot or to be put on a review list, similar to the items that Director Donaldson started off with at the beginning when he was outlining some of the other reports or next steps from our previous conversations on capital, those will be put onto a list. If there are items that we want to include as potential amendments, those will also be put on the list. And at the end of this discussion, we will look at those items as a whole.
Okay, good. So might I start the parking lot with a couple of items?
If right now, I just would first like to ask questions to his report. So points of clarification or understanding on any of the items or any of the comments that Director Donaldson just shared. And after that, then we can move to those points of discussion. So committee, are there any questions? Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions on Director Donaldson's report. Councillor Zavitz, did you have something? We will be moving into the divisional reports shortly, but on Director Donaldson, is there something you would like to have put into the, or put onto the floor to have discussion on now?
Yes, thank you for that opportunity. And certainly I would, I guess in terms of the parking lot, using that new term, I would like to put pickleball. And so, you know, in terms of whenever this is a good time to discuss it, but I certainly would like to put a pickleball up onto and into that parking lot for further discussion at some point in time during this meeting today. And certainly also the user fees in terms of, I don't know how we can consider raising user fees when we haven't even decided whether we're going to have a recreational person or not, who would then establish the need for increases in some of those costs. I would not be supportive of revenue increases to our, and I have a list of 5 of them. So I guess user fees is, as a parking lot item, would be what I would like to see discussion on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Director Donaldson is making note of those. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and through you onto the parking lot, I would like to have a discussion in the revenue increases that represent 45% of the revenue increases that pertain to community and directly to users. So I'd like to talk about that line by line. I would also, and this is more of a cosmetic presentation thing, but in the parking lot, I would like to propose that we, in our report going to public, we change the $500,000 assessment comparison to $100,000 to align with Huntsville and Gravenhurst. I listen to the local radio, and I hear the local radio were communicated this from Bracebridge and Huntsville, and I think we should be aligned so people understand are comparing apples to apples. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will still continue throughout the conversations as we go to each of the divisional reports. There will still be many opportunities for us to add to this list. I think I just want a committee to have that comfort or confidence. So I'm not seeing any other hands up right now. So I'm going to hand the floor back to, actually to our acting clerk. Oh, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. This will probably be coming up later in the comments, but can Director Donaldson explain why it's so much more of a tax raise in Gravenhurst and Huntsville than we are, and that even our original one, and that they're 2 and 3 times what ours are. Why are we cutting this budget so fine? And that
Okay, thank you.
I will explain in comments later, but I'd like
Okay.
him to answer that, please.
Okay. Would you like him to answer that question now, or could we wait to have that comment as included in the discussion at the end, Councillor Edwards? Okay.
And that discussion at the end.
Or did you want to? Pardon me? Yeah. Yeah.
And a
Supplemental? Yeah.
yes, I'd like to go everything line by line too, because we're cutting too much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, what I'd like to do is ask our acting clerk, Cheryl Hollows, to take us through the first portion of the administrative presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you. I'm just wishing to advise that this is page 23 in the agenda and page 43 in the 14, excuse me, in the deck. I'm going to be speaking to you today briefly regarding the council portion of the administrative budget. You can see on the first slide, sorry, pardon me. We have a list of projects and such that council accomplished in 2022, and these are just a few that we plucked from the report of November of 2022. Council accomplished a significant amount of work, updating official plans, amending and approving policies, bylaws, et cetera, and going into 2023, we are going to be looking at a number of further projects that we will want to be, thank you, but that we will be looking at considering first being improving this capital and operating budget today, and then addressing recommendations that have come from the numerous reports, master plans and such that have already been conducted, and then also the ones that are being conducted as I speak right now. And also we'll be taking preliminary steps to review the begin the process of reviewing the comprehensive zoning bylaw. I just wish to report that the budget in general remains the same, with one exception, and that is that we did increase council training. Training of councillors, I think, is really important. It helps you do your jobs, gives you a lot more expanded knowledge regarding what other municipalities do and throughout the province of Ontario. And we've increased that budget to permit many of these opportunities to attend in person, because since most of them were online for a few years now, they're going back to in person, which probably will encompass higher costs for travel and accommodation and the like. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Sorry, I got my screens mixed up. I should need another one. Put the screen on. Yes, thank you.
Committee, do we have any questions for our acting clerk? Okay, seeing none, I would like to ask our Ms. Lehman to walk us through the human resources section.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful. So just to review the 2022 projects and accomplishments from the Human Resources Department, the first half of 2022 still contained many infectious disease considerations. So proof of vaccination just ended March 1st, and PPE testing and protocols were a high priority. We continued to revise protocols and have considerations with staff about their personal situations regularly. We were successful recipients of the Canada Summer Jobs Grant and the Provincial Summer Experience Program in 2022. The federal program depends on local and national priorities, and we're not eligible every year. While training was ongoing during the pandemic, a lot of safety training is more hands-on and better suited to an in-person environment. In 2022, we trained corporately 70 people in a variety of programs: mental health first aid, working at heights, physical first aid, traffic control, and de-escalation. Several new leaders were sent for leadership development, and other programs and courses were also happening at the department and individual levels. We completed 2 topics under WSIB's Excellence Program in 2020 and 2021, entitling us to a grant in 22, which was later doubled due to a post-pandemic special program. A new performance development program was rolled out and started by some of the departments with the goal of modernizing the traditional performance appraisal and placing a focus on employee growth and succession planning for the municipality. In the fall of 2022, changes to the Employment Standards Act required employers to disclose any electronic monitoring of employees and a commitment to allow a disconnection from work. Finally, a new database became available, which allows municipalities to input their compensation data and consequently see other municipal data. Traditionally, this information would take weeks to collect and time to compile and compare. This should provide to be a critical tool in the competitive compensation landscape. In 2023, you can go to the next slide. We plan to apply for summer jobs funding again, as usual, complete work for the WSIB program, and continue corporate training programs with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion and leadership development. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Director Donaldson to walk us through the information technology.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. So it's been a busy year for information technology, so that the responsibility came over to my office at the beginning of the year. We started the year by getting a new service provider onboarded through an RFP process. That process is now with Lake Country Office Solutions. They acquired the contract party that we actually awarded the RFP to, but all the players remain the same. So that's been an excellent and exciting opportunity for us to update and modernize some of our projects. We also did our strategic plan. We got our strategic plan approved at the beginning of the year, and so we've been kind of working through that and working to try to get a number of those things that were in the recommendations that were high priority off the ground. And notably of that was some of our backups in disaster recovery and business continuity systems, which are currently in place. We also spent a considerable amount of time the past year working with service providers to get our high-speed fiber internet connected to the township office. So that was a great accomplishment late last year. We are now on full dedicated service through fiber. So that's provided a lot more stability and productivity for the municipal office. We also implemented some better or improved internet services at some of our township locations. So at the Raymond Community Center, where there was no service, we implemented service there, and we enhanced the service at the Bala Community Center and Arena. And when the Walker's Point Community Center service was interrupted, we came up with an alternative to get service back in there. Not as quickly as we would have liked, but we did get that accomplished as well. So I think all in all, it's been a progressive year for us in IT. And with respect to 2023, we'll continue to look at the recommendations of the strategic plan and looking at a transition to MS365. So that is formerly Office 365, which will enhance some of our products with respect to email, introduction of some new services like SharePoint, which will really help in terms of file communication and file sharing. We're also looking at getting our asset inventory updated and getting our replacement plan fully operational, so that we're not scrambling to replace obsolete equipment. We're getting a little bit ahead of the curve on that one. We've got a number of software implementation projects that are currently underway. So M-Files is currently underway. Building department and planning department are working to implement Cloud Permit. We did first part of City Works in 2022. We're looking to continue to work on that as well in terms of fleet management, and inventory management. We need to work on our emergency management program for cybersecurity to ensure that we're well protected and well guarded against attacks to the best of our ability. And we will talk about service enhancements. An FTE IT coordinator was requested, and that person would really be charged with quarterbacking a number of these activities in the upcoming year. So we did have a number of changes in the budget this year with respect to software fees. As like everything else, things continue to go up. But I mentioned the backup system and disaster recovery, which was really critical, and our internet services, which was a huge accomplishment for us this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Mayor Kelley and then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, and through you, just a comment. I think terrific job on on business continuity, disaster recovery, but the question that I have is about cybersecurity and making sure that we, I know that you do, Director Donaldson, but making sure that we understand the extreme sensitivity of the information that flows through our systems about a huge range of individuals. And I want to make sure we have some way to gauge that we're on top of the sort of ever expanding risk of cybersecurity attacks. I don't know how you gauge that other than getting attacked and finding out that you're wrong. But if there was a way to stay one step ahead, we need to invest in that because we put a lot of things at risk if we don't.
So Mayor Kelley, could I just clarify what your question is?
Yeah, the question is, do we have a way of sort of, I realize like when you decide to do a disaster recovery plan, you build it and you plop it in and you work with it until you decide to renew it. How do we gauge when the right time is to reinvent or revisit our cybersecurity risks and make sure we're adequately protected? Is there some milestone? Is there some way that we have where it's brought to our attention that it's time to upgrade?
Okay, thank you.
So with respect to cybersecurity, I mean, it's an ever evolving issue that's happening. I rely very much on the knowledge and skill set of our service provider in terms of virus protection, firewall, those types of products. We introduced email filtering to try to eliminate the amount of, because I think email is probably the biggest risk in terms of hackers trying to get into our systems. It's through providing information and inadvertently through phishing emails. So I don't know how you measure that. I think the best you can do is to evaluate your own systems against those of others and to see what is out in the market in terms of best-in-class protection and ensuring that you've got as many of the holes plugged as you can. And as I say, it's ever evolving, but it's certainly, I think it's twofold. It's one, trying to prevent the attack in the first place. And the second phase of it, the second prong of it is, if, in the event you do become vulnerable, what is your plan in terms to get things back up without having to release a ransom to release your security. So.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Director of IT. So you listed the accomplishments of 2022 in the IT world, which from my position is you've done a really good job with the resources you have, and you must be applauded for that at the same time as running the Treasury Department. What I'd like to know, or for you to share with committee, is back in November of 2021, we approved the IT strategic plan, and within it was full of recommendations of activities that we immediately need to create an implementation plan. So my question is, would you please identify to committee if any progress has been made as per the directive in November 2021 on the creation of the an implementation plan that addresses the key points of the strategic plan?
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So there hasn't been a formal report back to committee in the form of an implementation plan as was directed at that time. So I acknowledge that. We have, however, been moving forward with various number of the recommendations that were in the plan. I noted the implementation of fiber service was one of the recommendations. We did that. The backup and the disaster recovery was key. We've done that. MS 365 is one that was recommended as well. So the plan is to move forward with that. So there's a number, I think, and in terms of a report back, I'd be pleased to come back to committee with an update in terms of both what we have accomplished with respect to that implementation plan, and what we intend to do going forward and the timelines attached to that and proposed costs associated with that as well.
Supplemental?
Councillor Roberts, do you have a supplemental?
I do.
Or a new question?
Yeah, so I just reinforce what I said is I think you've done a really good job in doing picking off a few of the critical points. What pardon me, when my concern is what we haven't done. And the only way we can understand the risk of something like this is first start with an implementation plan, which takes all the key points out of the strategic plan, identifies the costs and the path forward. So I guess my question is, is there a place in the budget that we can at least start this implementation plan early in 2023, within the next 2 months? Can we engage a knowledgeable resource to do that implementation plan? Because I don't believe anyone currently employed by the township have the skill sets to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Donaldson.
So the plan, I think, would be that on page 24 of the deck, the package that was distributed, is the table for the information technology budget. On the row noted professional fees and honoraria, that's $25,000 in that line. That's intended to fund projects that are outside of the scope of our managed service provider. So our managed service provider is providing technical and help desk support. But if there are projects outside of the scope of that project, certainly something could be started there. There's funds in the budget available for that. If that proved to be insufficient, or there was a specific project that ended up having to be done, we could come back to committee in year and discuss draw from reserve, from the IT reserve, if that was so the direction of the committee.
Sorry, Chair, I still am not getting where I want to be. I'll just have to give a little bit of history. You'll recall that back in 2021, I was the only councillor that did not approve the strategic plan. I really liked the strategic plan, but I think I did, from my professional opinion, it didn't go deep enough with all the risks that were identified by the consultant. And I think we can't wait months to do this. Cybercrime, cyber threats, we're doing some stuff, but as Mayor Kelley says, we won't know till it hits it how good we are. So I really stress the importance of starting this immediately. So that's there's no comment there, no question, but there's a very much of a concern that we won't know how bad it is until it hits us.
So, thank you. I believe the question was, is there enough resources available in this budget to allow for the beginning of implementation, as you've noted, Councillor Roberts? And I think Director Donald says, I'll just for your clarification on that, and then I'll move on to Councillor Zavitz and Councillor Kent.
Sorry, I guess with respect to the resources question, I guess my response was there's $25,000 in the current operating budget. There's also reserve we could draw from if we needed to do that. I recognize the councillor's desire to have this addressed as urgently as possible, and certainly if it's a direction of committee, we can certainly prioritize that for 2023 to make that high priority.
Chair, would you put that in the parking lot, please?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz and then Councillor Kent.
Through you and to you, I'm wondering, just I know I would find it more helpful or helpful as well as really the first category with the reductions and or increases, adjustments, I guess, is IT. Could we ask the presenter in each case to also reflect on the savings to the budget that they've recommended. I think I would find that very helpful as well. I see that there's a $40,200 a bracketed amount. What aren't we getting?
Thank you for that question. I will ask Director Donaldson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So I had mentioned the IT savings. So on the line, IT hardware and software, when we had talked about that in the January meeting, so that's predominantly software is what it is, software and connection fees. So software costs. So there was some licensing costs in there for MS365 that was in excess of what I think we require. So there was reductions on that line to save that. There was also a reduction with respect to a new software product that we were bringing in for economic development. So we decided to defer that if that's, and that was where the savings were found in IT.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair Mazan. I had two simple questions. One was when the Director Donaldson, it's a good job, very good job, thank you. Just when the presenters speak, could you ask them to reference 2022 comparison? Just in high level, because your chart doesn't include it. So I'm always going back to try to, you put 23 and 24 on, but you don't say what the dollar increase or percentages was from the prior year, which would be helpful for me as a neophyte. And second, just with regard to the IT situation, and Mayor Kelley referenced this before, but my observation as a newcomer is the number of incidences I've already had of phishing, and particularly as it relates to Mayor Carroll, is concerning to me as a newcomer. I would have thought that this particular system, being a township, would have been very hardwired for that. It would be good if we could maybe get a report. I assume you track this number of incidences by person or whatever for phishing and other security breaches. I don't know if that's available, but that would be a helpful thing to know how we're doing. Obviously, seeing it trending downward would be helpful rather than the other way. Thank you.
Thank you. I will turn this over to Director Donaldson.
Thank you. So I can speak to our managed service provider. We do track tickets. So the grouping of how they identify those tickets, I can find out from them. I mean, I think the balance with the phishing, and I certainly can appreciate the issue. I think we all experience that both on our personal emails and our work emails, text messages, and so on. The delicate balance is the more you lock it down, the more people who are legitimately trying to get a hold of you will have their emails filtered out. So it's trying to find that balance point where some of these emails are coming from a gmail.com account, although they are spam. So it makes it a little bit more challenging, but certainly I can follow up and see what information is available and what we could do to try to make that a little bit more controlled.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I am going to now ask our acting clerk again to take us through legislative services. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Mazan. I'm here now to speak regarding legislative services at what is otherwise often considered to be the clerk's department. In addition to our normal function, which involves basically ensuring that the municipal act is followed, meeting procedures, records keeping, frontline reception to the public, all of those are sort of things. The clerk's department has undertaken a few other additional projects. The big one last year in 2022 was conducting the municipal election, which was we consider to be successful. We didn't have a huge number of issues or problems, so we're very proud of that. We also continued different projects, electronic records management, website, Engage Muskoka page. We continue our project to update and modernize sort of policies. And so that sort of is the gist of what occurred in 2022. Going into 2023, one of our major emphasis will be around communications, presenting to you a communications plan and then implementing that plan upon your approval and direction. We have a few projects around acquisition and disposition policy of assorted municipal properties that we own. We are still striving to complete the electronic records management project. And then we have a number of other policies that we look to improve with the new term of council procedure, a delegation of authority, delegation, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, we're looking to better utilize our electronic program that puts our agendas and reports and such together and take advantage of some of the additional opportunities there. And finally, we are going to undertake a rather large project around accessibility in the Township of Muskoka Lakes, in particular with respect to our website. With regard to budget changes, thanks to the diligent work of the Director of Finance, we've managed to secure an insurance program that at a substantially reduced price to that previous. We have not had to utilize all of the election funds in reserve due to electronic voting. That is not nearly as costly as mail-in votes for obvious reasons. And then also different professional fees and such have been reallocated more efficiently to the departments that incur them. With regard to what was cut from our department, we had a minor reduction in professional fees paid to associations that we no longer require. So any questions? Happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Mazan. Through you to our acting clerk. So am I to understand with the looking forward to the 2023 initiatives, the develop and implement corporate-wide communication strategy, does the communications officer of our township report up to legislative services, or should they? I guess is maybe a better question. Wonder if you could answer that, just in terms of reporting and how does this rather ambitious and very interesting communication strategy unfold? Thank you.
I believe the question is, does the communications officer report through legislative services? Thank you.
She does.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will now ask Director Donaldson to walk us through the financial services section.
Thank you again. So in 2022, some of the accomplishments for us, we were able to accelerate the delivery of the budget and the financial statements last year as compared to what it had been in previous years. I think the January passing of our 2022 budget was one of the earliest ones in recent memory, which is, I think, a benchmark we should always strive to. And the 2021 audited financial statements were brought forward for approval in July, which was the earliest since I've been here. I recognize there was some transition, but certainly a goal that I would strive for. The Municipal Modernization Funding Program offered by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing had 3 intakes in 2022, or 2 additional ones in 2022. In one of them, we did a joint proposal with the town of Huntsville to update our tax portal and facilitate the electronic tax bill delivery. So that project is nearly complete. And we are hoping that in 2024, after we complete some testing this year, our interim bills have already gone out for this year, but we'll have the option for residents to enroll to have their tax bills delivered by email. in PDF format, which I think will be a huge convenience for some who get their tax bills delivered to accounts different than perhaps their property. So I think that will be a great enhancement. We're also, of course, we also offer online payment for that as well. So that's a great product, a great service that we offer. The clerk mentioned about the RFP we did last year for insurance services, which netted nearly $500,000 savings on our insurance premiums for the year. In terms of 2023, I think we're continuing to emphasize digital services, so trying to do as much remotely and online as possible. So digitizing our accounts payable and getting more of our payments through EFT and issuing less checks. Looking at ways in terms of how we can provide services and options for payers that are alternatives to cash or checks. We're also, again, as I mentioned, the Citizen Tax Portal, which would allow people to log in, see the activity on their tax account, see how their payments have been applied, see where there's issues that they may have around questions on their bill, that they can do a kind of a self-help looking, as opposed to having to call in or request copies. In 2023, we're also looking to update the procurement bylaw. The current bylaw is dated 2004. So it's due for a refresh, as well as various other policies. And we've talked a little bit during these budget deliberations around financial strategy to address capital and looking at ways we can improve our capital budgeting. And maybe and one of the plans for this year is expanding from 10 to 25-year outlook to really kind of give us that long-term horizon in terms of being able to see around the corner of what's potentially coming at us. And as noted in my opening remarks, update to our reserve and reserve fund policies, and trying to get that noted to be more formula-based, and trying to make that a little bit more scientific as it relates directly to our capital needs as determined through our asset management plans and other information that we have available to us. So in terms of year over year, and to Councillor Marquette's earlier question, there are some differences between the budget and but from our forecast perspective, our expenses are up 13.7% before transfers to reserves. And I'm looking at page 30 of the item on the slide deck. That is about halfway down the page on the far right side, $110,000. Our department is heavily leaning towards salaries. I mean, that's where the bulk of our expenses lie. So we look at those in terms of our areas of expense. Interest income on the income side for 2022 was much higher than budgeted, and we expect that to level off, but certainly remain somewhat high, as interest rates are expected to perhaps level off, but remain higher than they certainly have been historically over the last decade. Most of the cash held by the township is related to funds and funds reserves, so we really need to look at how we're investing those funds, and how are we generating and maximizing the return on those, and looking also in terms of making sure that we're optimizing all opportunities for grants funding as well. We had an increase in 2022 and 2023 related to OSIF, and we need to ensure that opportunities for application-based funds as well, or grants as well, are explored to optimize opportunities to access funds from other sources. And I think I'll stop there for any questions.
Thank you, Director Donaldson. Committee, any questions? Councillor Edwards.
Yes, through the chair to the director. The investment income, and that, so in other words, if we have more in reserves, we're getting more investment income. Is that right? And in that way, why are we not putting money into reserves to capitalize on that? And the second question is, do we use internal borrowing when we're doing and that major projects?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, thanks. So our, in terms of funds held in reserve and reserve funds are currently held in our current account with the bank. So we do not have an investment portfolio for reserve and reserve funds. And I think that is a priority for 2023. We need to look at that
Right.
to ensure that we are optimizing and maximizing our return on those cash reserves held. And with respect to your second question, sorry, can you remind me again? If I had it, I lost it.
The district, when they're doing projects, they borrow internally, which saves them the interest on the other, and they charge themselves interest on it, so that they're self-funding rather than and not borrowing and then paying interest. What are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Right. So we do not currently have a process or a program in place for internal borrowing, and our reserves, I don't think, are at quite the level that would really warrant that as yet, but certainly something we can look at if that's the direction of committee, that we would want to introduce some sort of a program. But again, at $20 million and the size of some of the projects we're working on and trying to manage our capital program the way it is, I'm not sure we're there yet, but we can certainly look at something like that.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions?
Roberts, maybe?
No? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and through to Councillor Edwards. Councillor Answers, you asked a question. Did you want that put in the parking lot for discussion, or are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think it should be in the parking lot. Our reserve should be built up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oops. Okay, seeing none, I believe. Yeah. So we have just completed the presentation on the administration portion. That was the opportunity for us to ask questions. Now we're going to get into discussion on this particular segment. So the questions that that Director Donaldson has been writing down, he's going to review that list, and it allows us also to have an opportunity to have a discussion. So at this point, is there any preliminary comments or not questions, but comments for discussion on this section? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Director Donaldson, perhaps you could just summarize the notes that you've made for this section to go into the parking lot.
Sorry, so with respect to the administration, we talked about cybersecurity, although I don't know, I believe the implementation plan is something that we'll come back to in terms of resources available for that. We will talk, and we mentioned about the I think that was the major one, and then we just talked about borrowing and investment in terms of the reserves and reserve funds. I mean, there was a number of questions, but I'm not sure which ones were intended for discussion that would be aimed at a list of discussion points that would are budget impacts or report backs that are required for future. So I heard about the IT and the implementation and resources available to do that. And then I heard about reserve and reserve funds in terms of what we're doing for investments and building those reserves up. And I know there were some comments made at the beginning with respect to user fees and pickleball, but we'll get into those more specifically as we get into those particular divisions, and we can talk to that at a more granular level. I don't know if there's anything I've missed from that list.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you to Mark. And again, great report. I guess the thought I would have as it relates to investment income on your treasury piece here. Clearly, you're cycling the available resources through the local institution that we would use as a township, and realizing some very significant interest rates. It looks like it's, in the area of 5.25%, maybe 5.5% on maybe. Are you rolling 1-year GICs? I mean, we could expose 15 million of our 20 million for a 1-year GIC and lock that in and get a considerable amount of money for it, which would, of course, would appear that you're, accounting for that. Is that just let me climb inside your head for a minute on that?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So as noted, currently all of our funds are just held in our current account at the bank. So there's no investments, and that would be a priority for 2023 to update our investment policy and to make those opportunities available to us to optimize that income. So the income that we're currently earning, we have a floating rate against prime on our current account. So that's why the rates have gone up in terms of return. I think there's opportunities where we probably could do better in a very secured instrument. And I think we need to explore those options.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to continue along, if I may, committee till about 10:30. So I am going to, I see your hand up. Sorry, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, Mark, have you checked with the district and that some of the towns and townships are using, what is it, one investment or something like that? That's through and that. Are you aware of that? And how would it help us? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
So I am aware of the one investment. They make themselves well known to us through emails through the Municipal Finance Officers Association. But again, no efforts or no work has been able to be done up to this point. So it is a priority for the coming year.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Burry.
So I've offered to help Mark with this space, which is something that I actually do for a living, investing, and the issue will be for us determining our liquidity requirements. It'll require a plan that effectively looks at our reserves and where they're pegged to, when the money is going to be needed. It's not just as simple as throwing it into a one investment account, which is why Mark hasn't already done it. So there's a lot of interplay here to be able to do it right, but there is revenue to be found in this space. But I think doing it methodically with purpose is the way we ought to be moving forward. I did this for a university. I've helped a cemetery. It's like there's ways to do it. It will generate more revenue, but it has to be thoughtful and purposeful, or we'll get caught.
Thank you. Oh. Sorry, I don't know if can you hear me or? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burry. I agree that thoughtful approach is a good approach. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none, I am going to move on then to our director, Director Pink, Development Services and Environmental Sustainability.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We'll start with the. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Yes, perfect. So we'll start with the Building Division of Development Services and Environmental Sustainability. As you can see, in 2022, we had a busy year. We issued 1,272 permits. And as you recently were forwarded, MPACT provided some annual results. And we had the second highest annual growth rate in Ontario municipalities under 15,000, and by far the highest growth in Ontario with seasonal properties. Some of the other accomplishments besides that day-to-day activity, we were able to work with Cloud Permit and got e-permitting software up and running for early 2023. We did have created some online enhanced online GIS mapping. Some building permit data was now made available to the public 24/7 online. We also received approval of an updated septic system reinspection program, and we initiated the creation of a sewage system database township-wide in order to implement that program. To the next slide. So in 2023, again, continuing the beyond the day-to-day activities and enforcement of the Building Code Act and Ontario Building Code, we're beginning to implement that e-permitting software and working with the community on the rollout of that cloud permit software. And really the main project is that continued work on that sewage system database. We're hopeful to complete it approximately Q2 or Q3. And we're going to establish and initiate that updated sewage system reinspection program, aiming for a 2024 rollout. So really the main year-over-year budget changes, and you'll see this in the service enhancement section later in the budget discussion, is a new building inspector, program administrator type position to both establish and then implement that updated sewage system reinspection program. I look to you, Chair, whether you wish me to go through all 4 areas and wait for questions, or perhaps best to do one by one. I look for your direction.
Thank you. Well, just giving you handed it back here, we might as well go question by section. So committee, any questions? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm looking at page 35. I don't of the hard copy. I don't know what page it would be in the agenda package where we list the revenues for buildings, and I'm looking at 1.4. If I read it correctly, Director Pink, is that almost $1.5 million? Am I reading that properly? I guess I'll give you my question, brothers. My question is, we in 2022, and whether this is the right place to ask this question, in 2022, how much revenue did we realize from into the park land dedication reserve? And is that a question that you won't have at your fingertips?
Thank you. I will ask Director Pink to respond.
Thank you. I may actually look to Mark a little bit for the precise number. I'm sure we can pull it probably relatively quickly for you. But keep in mind that wouldn't be revenue generated from the building division. That would be through applications for consent and planning, but that is a separate account. And again, I'd look, I'm sure between Mark and I, we can pull that number in a moment for you.
Okay, thank you. No big rush. I'd just like to know that because I have it's pertinent to our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, committee. Seeing no other questions, Director Pink, move on to the next portion, please.
Thank you. So the next area is bylaw enforcement. And again, another busy year in that area. We received 338 formal complaints in 2022. Also approved 57 licenses through various license approvals, and also had council approval of a bylaw enforcement policy and procedural manual. And we updated a number of bylaws, obviously most prominently the tree preservation, site alteration and fireworks bylaws generated a lot of community input and engagement, like the council process. We updated those bylaws last year. Yeah, for 2023, if we can go to the next slide. Again, a busy slate of special projects. We're aiming, and I'm sure committee recalls the last planning committee, and like the good discussion on the administrative monetary penalty system, or AMPS. And as well, we're looking at regulations surrounding short-term rentals, continuing to update bylaws as needed. Really, the dark sky bylaw was already looked at earlier this year, late last year, and we're going to continue to work on that, as well as enhance community engagement and education. So really, the main year-over-year changes as we're learning more about bylaw enforcement and my involvement in improving our statistics and record keeping in that area. We're certainly recognizing that both this increased bylaw enforcement activity does result in some greater revenues than expected, but also a corresponding fairly significant increase in legal expenses. And again, as you'll see in the service enhancement section later on in the budget discussion, there is a proposal for a new administrative position, predominantly to support the AMPS system and short-term rentals. So I'll leave it with that, available for any questions.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. Thank you for that. Committee, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, just to pick up on Director Pink's last comment that the administrative assistant is primarily needed for AMPS and short-term rentals. And we know nothing about short-term rentals yet. We haven't even decided what we're going to do. We know that AMPS, and I have a question here, Chair. We know that AMPS only had 21 charges last year. Under the, you do state under year-over-year budget changes on page 37, that it identifies the proposed new FTE administrative position is needed for administrative monitoring system and for SDRs. Would you agree that, from my interpretation, my reading, my going back and forth on questions, would you agree that the primary, and it should be added to this business case if you do, the primary reason for the administrative position is to provide back office help for the enforcement team, that they're spending a lot of time in the office, and that if we get this role, the primary reason for it, we would get more enforcement out in the field, and that really AMPS is not going to take a lot of time from what discussions I gathered in assessment. And we don't know about short-term rental, but I guess my question is a summary. Can we add in there that the primary reason for the administrative assistant is for back office support of enforcement? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts, I just wanted to be clear on the question here, as because that was moving into the service level enhancement discussion. So Director Pink, I see you have your hand up. I think okay, I'll let you respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to respond through you, although again, I agree it will come up obviously later in the budget discussions. I would generally agree with Councillor Roberts that certainly is an aspect, and it is noted in the business case. You will note it's predominantly the three areas: AMPS, short-term rentals, and as well as office support existing. I guess what I would add though is the current situation is somewhat manageable. Existing bylaw staff are able to complete their day-to-day duties as well as the administrative work. It is challenging certainly for a portion of the year, but it is manageable. I think the part I may respectfully somewhat disagree is the AMP system, I think, will be quite administratively burdensome. It is essentially, as we discussed at the last planning committee, bringing in a court house or a court process in-house, and that will be quite administrative burdensome. So that is why the position has been recommended this year as part of really what would be the trigger or the straw that would break the back, so to speak. I don't think existing staff would be able to handle the current administrative workload that they're currently doing, as well as those two new programs.
Supplemental, Chair. I agree this is under service enhancements. I'm bringing up the point under the case that they have here where they listed that it was for AMPS and for short-term rentals. where I like to understand when we do the service enhancements, exactly the high level roles of this AMPS person, because I think that the most important thing is enforcement. And trying to get our enforcement people out right now and I think that's will be, in my opinion, will be significant for our desire to do more enforcement. So,
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to, if we could just keep focused on our questions right now. I think we've heard the comment, and we will have another opportunity to discuss this at the enhancement level. So thank you. I believe I saw Councillor Nishikawa and then Mayor Kelley.
Thank you. My question would be through you to Director Pink. Is there an opportunity under AMPS to ticket for parking? And specifically in conversations with concerning Hardy Lake and Torrance Barrens, for example, we put up no parking signs, and it was explained to me by MECP that either they can start ticketing people if we give them the authority. And I would say I also had this discussion through district, and we know that district does not have bylaw officers to do this, and the police are not, it's not a good use of the police's time to stand there and hand out tickets. However, they can give the authority to our township. So have we considered parking fines and that type of thing part of the AMPS program?
Thank you. Director Pink.
Yes, we have, and you can do parking tickets, I believe, under AMPS. However, I think there's an extensive amount of work that needs to occur with MTO first, and a number of systems put in place, and staff will be, if we do get approval of the AMPS program, we'll work as diligently as we can to get that in place, and then bring the parking bylaw forward to incorporate it into AMPS. So it can be done, and just a little bit of upfront work that needs to occur before it's in place.
Thank you. Mayor Kelley, I saw your hand was up. Do you still have a question?
I think you solved it. Thank you. I was just simply going to ask Councillor Roberts if we could put the issue of bylaw enforcement into and short-term rentals into the parking lot. I've got a few points of view to express. I don't think now is a good time.
Thank you.
I think you did it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I think we've gone, oh no, my apologies, economic development, Director Pink.
Thank you, Chair. Only halfway there in my areas. The third is economic development and community grants. It's joint, and as you can see again, besides the day-to-day activities, we had a busy 2022. Obviously, one of the large milestones was the approval of the community improvement plan. That includes both public realm enhancements, and we also had approval of the private sector incentive program policy. So those were big steps. Prepared a climate adaptation plan as part of our climate action plan, as well as some, again, annual business survey, development of the regional broadband strategy with the district, approval of a special event permit bylaw, and the temporary patio extension program and community grant program. Would also note that just as part of the CIP alone, the ECDEP function does assist other departments as well as its own with grant applications, and we received approximately $70,000 in grants just in the CIP program alone last year. So if we can move to the next slide. In 2023, again, continuing the implementation of our economic development strategy and the implementation of our community improvement plan, both public and private sector components. Already, I suppose, check off the approval of the climate adaptation plan. We're largely there with planning committee's recommendation last week, and commencement of the climate mitigation plan, and those other matters listed. So I'll leave economic development community grants there and open to questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, Director Pink, I'll let you continue on.
Thank you very much. So the last area in development services and environmental sustainability is planning. In 2022, Planning staff processed 365 planning applications and produced 254 reports to council to assist in your review of those applications, and some pretty large special projects as well. We had adoption of our new Township Muskoka Lakes official plan, as well as an official plan amendment for the resort village of Minette. Had a number of housekeeping or zoning bylaw updates on a number of matters, most predominantly legal non-complying lots and buildings, and also created a communication tower consultation policy. And in 2023, really looking to defend and get final approval of both those adopted official plans that I just noted, both the main official plan as well as the official plan amendment for the resort village of Minette. And obviously the big new project is the our new comprehensive zoning bylaw, likely to be a community planning permit system bylaw given recent legislative changes at the province. Also looking similar to building last year, this year the GIS technician position will be looking to enhance some online GIS mapping on the planning realm. And similarly again to building, where planning staff are now working with Cloud Permit for an online planning application submission and tracking portal. So those are their projects. With respect to year-over-year budget changes, as I noted, Bill 23 resulted in some changes, unfortunately a decreased revenue with respect to loss of site plan control. Again, that's all for planning and available for questions.
Thank you. Questions I see from Councillor Edwards first and then Councillor Kent.
Yes, just to follow up to Councillor Roberts and that question. When we get parkland dedication, where is that shown in our report? Is it in planning? Where does it show? Is it a separate line item or lumped in?
Thank you. I think I'll ask Director Donaldson to comment.
Thank you. So to the question, for 2022, parkland dedication funds received were 124,000 roughly. Those funds are not, they don't get reflected in the operating budget per se. They're a direct transfer to the reserve, to the obligatory reserve, and they are recognized as revenue when they're drawn out of that reserve for various purposes for capital nature around parklands and recreation and so on. So their amounts received don't come in as revenue until they're actually utilized for a project.
Okay, I think that answers Councillor Roberts and that question, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kent and then Councillor Roberts.
This is for Director Pink. Just a quick question. I'm on the subject that was just mentioned. Is I'm looking at the long-term reserve and reserve fund forecast, and it's just a concept and philosophy. You said you had 365 planning applications this year, and I noticed that the trend goes up a little and then it drops. What's your view? Like, when is the planning? Is this going to slow down? Is it going to stay at the same rate? Where do you see the outlook over the long term? And I know it's speculation, but I'd love to hear it from the source for what's going to happen in this our township for what is a primarily summer residential development.
Okay. Thank you. Director Pink?
Thank you. Through you. Obviously a difficult question. I don't have a magic crystal ball. It is largely anecdotal, but in my experience, almost coming on 19 years here, every year we ask, can it certainly keep up this pace? And it tends to continually tick upward with respect to building and planning activity. And even in the past downturn, 2008, 2009, I find our municipality is somewhat insulated from those effects, perhaps greater than other municipalities. And we didn't really experience downturns in those times. I think the last 2 years with COVID, we saw, I think, an abnormally high level of both building and planning activity. And I think that will, at a minimum plateau, or if not decrease slightly. And I think we're already seeing that a little bit. But generally, I think it will stay pretty steady at those levels, if not even slight increase over time. We certainly, I guess things I would note, with new official plan policies, fairly restrictive policies, I think we'll see likely a slight decrease in consent applications, but we may see some increases in other planning applications for relief because of those restrictions, those added restrictions. And I would note you'll probably see a drop in numbers next year, obviously, just because of the loss of site plan control. So there's right off the bat about 100 to 125 applications roughly every year that no longer will occur. So hopefully that gives you an idea of sort of some of my anecdotal thoughts on the future of planning application numbers and development activity.
Thank you. Yep, Councillor Kent. You're on mute.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. The only reason I mention it, that's very helpful, Director Pink, is just when you look at the long-term forecast and we look at the reserve balance declining, and there's no formulaic thing, but I don't see any, I do see some drops in the numbers starting in years 8, 9, and 10, but I don't see any, once we settle in with site plan control being removed, do you not anticipate any increase in your fee levels and things like that would, in addition to, let's assume that development levels stay the same, I would expect those numbers would go up slightly every year along with inflation. So we have the capital side growing, but not the revenue increases growing from the parkland and lieu and all that stuff. All that, even with the same number of units of, let's say, severances, we'd get more because the rates would go up every year. So I just thought that was a minor edit to the longer term forecast that would offset some of the capital side increases to see the revenue side increases going up as well. Just a comment.
Well, it is a question, and I think there could be a question in there. Is there an ability for us to influence the revenue or the fees? So I will ask Director Ping.
Thank you. And I might lean on Mr. Donaldson. Thank you for turning on your screen. I think what maybe some of the confusion, I don't think you're seeing a long-term forecast of operating other than the next 2 years or 3. What you're seeing is a capital plan, and in planning, it's really just our main capital projects or the zoning and official plan review, which are, again, cyclical and more long-term.
I am actually looking, David, there's a, Director Pink, there's a 10-year revenue, 10-year reserve and reserve fund forecast that shows fund contributions by source, development charges, parkland and lieu, CCBF, et cetera. That's what I was referring to. And I mean, it's not a major edit. It's just, I know that in the last meeting, I asked for to Director Donaldson to look at increasing to tying to CPI, some of the cost increases associated with the capital side, but there's no, on the revenue side, we haven't done that. That's all.
And on those transfers, I really look to Mark to assist.
Okay,
there.
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent, just for everybody's understanding, it's hard to see when you're holding up your iPad. Is there a page number that you're on mute?
Page 22 of 131 in the full package, not it was the first package, I believe. Am I right, Director Donaldson?
So yes, I will turn this back to him. Thank you. That's a good clarification.
Yeah, and I believe in the bottom left, it's page 13 if it's on your page, but in the package that was on screen. But just with respect to parkland and lieu, and again, I think it's a combined response with Director Pink, but the parkland is limited by the Planning Act in terms of percentage of the property fees, the property value, in terms of what's recognized as contributions to that reserve for parkland dedication. So there's not a lot of flexibility on the part of the township. There's no control in that part to increase contributions to the parkland in lieu, because it's a set percentage of the value of the property that is being impacted by that application. So we can control user fees for the applications themselves, which is in the operating, But in terms of contributions to that reserve is guided and restricted through the Planning Act.
It would be reasonable to assume, though, that the property values will continue to go up, which is the offset. Even if fees stay the same, the property value will go up, which will drive the parkland and severance up. But these are minor edits.
Sorry, Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank Director Donaldson for the clarification that in 2022, there was a $124,000 deposited into the reserves parkland. I just need, I just want one more question with Dr. Pink and then Dr. Pink, I'm sorry. It's Director Pink, and possibly in addition to the parking lot items. So assuming that we earn that $124,000 into reserve, will you confirm my understanding that in 2023, if we take in 124K, that we're going to have to spend 60% of that money, which is around $75,000 in 2023 or shortly after, as a result of Bill 23.
Okay, thank you. Director Pink.
A lot of things, Councillor Roberts, but that's the first doc. Yes, I can confirm Bill 23 would require us to spend 60% on an annual basis, and not to belabor the discussion. I apologize, Councillor Ken. I think I understand your question a little better now. Yes, property values would go up, and it's set as Director Donaldson stated at the 5%. But keep in mind, not to sort of put dark clouds on it, but I would caution that the recent changes to our official plan will put a large freeze on lot creation in our township. Again, a little off topic from budget, but just recreational carrying capacity. RCC alone is going to prohibit lot creation on approximately 2/3 of the lakes in the township. So I wouldn't be looking through these budget discussions as parkland revenue being a sort of revenue generator, cash cow, or continued increase as in historical levels, because I think we might see that come down a little bit. So just a slight word of caution there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the parking lot, I would like to add an item on how this 75,000, if my calculations are correct, will help our budget discussions for 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, through you to the director. Site plan agreements, as you said, can't be used now. But do we not have another tool to get and that securities and that Director Pink?
Thank you. Director Pink.
Thank you, through you. Yes, that's correct. Through the minor variance process, we do have the ability to impose conditions, and one of those conditions under the Planning Act is explicitly agreements. So you may recall, I think it was at the January or perhaps December meeting, we proposed a small fee for those processes, and we're starting to already recommend those conditions at Committee of Adjustment. So that will replace a small fraction, probably 10 to 20% of the site plan applications that we previously had. And I think most importantly, though, I would note, as we are undertaking, hopefully later this year, commencing the zoning bylaw review, it's likely we're going to explore in depth the feasibility or possibility of going to a community planning permit system, which would in essence replace the site plan tool that we lost. So that's likely to come back, or hopefully over time, provided no further curveballs from the province.
Okay, thank you. Okay, committee, I'm not seeing any more questions. I am sensitive to the time, and I would like, I think what I'd like to do is suggest a 15-minute break. We will come back and have any kind of discussion on the Director Pink's section before we move into the next few sections after that break. Okay, so we'll be back here at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Okay. Okay, committee. Can you guys hear me? That is on. Okay. Welcome back. It is just after 11. So for those who are with us, yes, thanks. Put your camera back on so we know you're here. Thank you. Just wait for a few more just to put their cameras back on. Councillor McIntyre, Zavitz, Edwards, and Burry. Okay, we're just waiting for Councillor Zavitz and Burry, but I believe we can get started. So we have asked questions of our Director Pink. Councillor Roberts, just before we move into the discussion on planning, do you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, and through your indulgence, we had discussed this last evening. If you're okay with it, I'll proceed.
Yes, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to extend an apology for my outburst last week at planning. It was out of the frustration I was having with my internet connectivity. It was not directed towards any staff or any topic. And so I'd like to apologize for that. I'll be more careful, but there's a lesson learned for everyone on this call, including the public. All indications I had was I was offline. And that delayed a few seconds before it actually happened. So be very careful. A lesson learned for me is that don't put your mouth in gear until you're sure you're not publicly addressing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Roberts. I am now going to open our conversation up to discussion on Director Pink's topics. And I'm going to ask Director Donaldson to review the items that he has captured on the review list or the parking lot. And once he's done that, if there's some further discussion to be had, we will open it up to committee. So with that, Director Donaldson on planning, please, or Director Pink's section.
Thank you. So I had two items that were noted. One was with respect to the administrative position for bylaw, and that will be deferred to a service enhancement discussion, but that was raised in terms of the role of that person. And there was another question with respect to how parkland dedication funds are used. And just quickly, with respect to that point, I would just point committee and the public to page 10 of the package, which is page 19 of 131 in the agenda package online. So this is our detailed forecast for 2023. And in the first section, you see obligatory reserve funds as a heading, and then you can see parkland dedication. And in that column, you can see capital requirements minus 171,000. So that is the forecasted planned draw from parkland dedication in 2023 to fund capital expenditures in 2023. That was the 11.5 million that we talked about off the top. Parkland money is used for capital purposes. It cannot be used for operating purposes. That's one of the restrictions on it. So I just wanted to perhaps address that now, and I'm not sure if there's any further discussion that would be required on that point on the parking lot, but I'll leave it on the list for now. And we can revisit that and come back to that if necessary. So thank you.
Okay. Committee. Do you have any further conversation or discussion to be had as it relates to Director Pink's sections? Councillor Zavitz.
Well, thank you through you. I guess more question to you in terms of this, parking lot. In terms of the timing or timelines, if you will, today. Some of what I would like to talk about certainly relates to the business cases. I think it affects the business cases, but it implicates back and forth. So I'm just wondering, yeah, at what point in time, if we're through all of this, do you engage then the parking lot piece? It's, I hope you understand where I'm coming from, but one speaks to the other.
Okay, so just for clarification then, is it talking to an item that's already on that list for the parking lot, or is there something new that you would like to add?
Well, I had for the parking lot indicated my thoughts on, I guess it certainly would be Public Works as it relates to a number of items relating to user fees and cost recoveries.
Right. So when we get to the Public Works section, we can talk about that a little bit more clearly. And then I think what we're trying to do through each section is identify which ones would be future perhaps projects versus the potential for a more robust discussion at the end as we look to look at the entire package.
Yeah,
so
good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
No, thank you. I do not see any other hands at this point. So at this point, I will then move on to our fire and emergency services and ask Chief Morrell, please.
Sorry, thank you through you, Chair, and to committee. I'll continue on through the emergency services division, which is actually divided up into two programs. One is fire service, sometimes referred to as fire stations in the document. And the first program is emergency management, the emergency management program. On the slide in front of you comes from the agenda package on page 55. It can also be referenced as page 46 in the deck. The emergency management program is primarily the program for the township to ensure that it is prepared as per legislation for emergencies for the community. The project accomplishments for 2022, as highlighted here, were provincial compliance. A big part of the program is making sure that we have our HIRA, or our hazard identification and risk assessment, completed, which identifies the 10 most prominent risks to the community, and also that we update our critical infrastructure program so that we update any of the assets or systems that are very critical to the municipality. And if it compromised in any fashion, we would want to have a plan for. We educated multiple residents at a newly developed public education event last year, Family Safety Night. This was done in partnership with one of our emergency management partners, the Ministry of Natural Resources. We have a continual best practice exchange with our many partners in the District of Muskoka through the Muskoka Emergency Response Committee. The net expenditure to the entire program is $43,100. As you'll see, there is a little bit of an omission. We can change the slides. When we talk about staffing, there's actually 1/3 of one of our staff members of the 4 that we have here actually comes from this program. Year over year budget increases, as noted in the program, are $2,000 extra or increase, sorry, for emergency operations group member training to accommodate the new members of the group, and also an increase in public education funding to offset our signage and pricing during an emergency preparedness week promotions. Our 2023 initiatives also continue to be that we're going to upgrade our communication technology in our secondary emergency operations center. It's actually housed here at the Port Carling Station. The primary emergency operations center will still continue to be council chambers. We also are looking at increased offerings of our online training to our new members, which is in conjunction with what's happened with the pandemic. We will be working with multiple partners, including MNRF, Hydro One, OPG, and the rail companies as they pass through our area, so we can get more exercise opportunities. We will be actually also offering more emergency management training to our firefighters so that there's bench strength as it comes to this program. So we're looking forward to that as it builds out. That is the emergency management program, and I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none. Chief Morrell.
Thank you, Chair, through you to committee. The second big piece of the emergency services department area is the fire service. The purpose of the fire service is to reduce, mitigate, or eliminate community risk, as well as to respond to emergencies as they occur 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We call ourselves an all hazards fire department, which we do represent a lot of those risks in our establishing and regulating bylaw. We're composed of 115 firefighters responding out of 10 stations throughout the township. Last year, we responded to the highest amount of emergencies we've ever responded to in the past. 694 emergencies were responded to. We conducted the most inspections we've ever conducted, which is 122 fire code inspections. We spoke with the most data recorded persons we've ever recorded at 2,415 children. We also invested 14,000 training hours into our firefighters. We have 2,000 Facebook followers and 1,400 Twitter followers. We hired 14 new firefighters, and we did 920, and this is a really good thing, door-to-door smoke alarms were checked. And we reduced our 14-minute response time goal, where we met it 55% of the time, which was a 5% increase year over year. We also maintained 27 fire apparatus, 5 marine vessels, and 6 off-road vehicles. Hands-on training continues to be our focus, and you'll notice that that was the increase mainly from year over year, and that was due to pandemic, catching up on all the hands-on training that we needed to have, and as well as setting ourselves up to meet the new firefighter mandatory certification regulation. You could change the slide. On this slide, you'll see full-time personnel are 4, and part-time personnel are 115. There's no change to our full-time personnel. Year-over-year budget changes are in our training area. There's an increase in training remuneration, mainly due to the regulatory changes, and I can discuss that further. We also had an increase in our emergency remuneration, again, due to those 694 calls, which was a 15% call volume increase year over year. In our 5 years, our average is actually a 3% increase year over year. And in 10 years, it's 3% as well. Apparatus costs have also increased, and our time to get things is actually increasing. We're hearing different supply chain issues, increases in certain products of 15 to 30%. However, there is some silver lining. We did offer to council an increase of fees, asking that we amend the bylaws so that we can get more cost recovery for one of our largest impacts to our call response, which is fire alarms. Our 2023 initiatives, we want to meet new training requirements, again, for the emergency services staff in accordance with the provincial mandatory regulations. We plan on decreasing our emergency response time through more data collection and target setting amongst our people. Continuing to execute on our rigorous life cycle plan, which we have developed and maintained for Township. And we want to increase our smoke alarm and carbon monoxide alarm compliance through door-to-door awareness programs. We also want to increase our social media campaigns to grow our fire safety awareness in the community. I'll now stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay. Oh, Councillor Nishikawa. And then Councillor Kent.
Thank you. My question through you to the chief, how many of the, sorry, I don't have the exact number written down, but the 600 and some odd calls were medical?
Chief Merrill?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, I believe it's 120.
So just if I can confirm, then we had, I'll just say 500 fires in the township?